Take a look at what's playing out right now on your screens. This is, in fact, we're being told from Muzaffarnagar, where you've got locals gathering. Muzaffarpur, I beg your pardon. That's where this is playing out. You can see locals armed with lathis, destroying property brazenly. Not one official there to stop them. This is a mob, an unruly mob that's going on a rampage. Obviously, at this point, if there are army aspirants who are, in fact, expressing their ire over the Agnipath scheme, this can be done peacefully. What you're seeing instead is the complete opposite of that. This is violent completely, as many of them armed with lathis are staging protests, damaging public property, police officials trying to push them back. But there's also incidents of stone pelting that's being reported right now. So you're seeing vandalism and chaos playing out in several parts of the country. Let's get you image by image what's happening right now, particularly in Bihar. The most defining image and the scariest one that's emerged so far is from Samastipur, where you see train coaches up in flames, completely charred as protesters entered this particular railway station. Nobody there to stop them, as you can see. And then they set this entire train on fire. Luckily, there were no passengers inside, so it doesn't look like there were any casualties reported. But this horrifying image perhaps sums up the kind of damage that's been reported in the last few hours alone because of this violent agitation. Let's get you the next image also that's emerged. Now, most of these protests are happening in Bihar, and let me highlight for you that most of them are happening for some reason at railway stations. And you see this in Ara of Bihar. One of, in fact, the booths that are set up in these railway stations has been set on fire. Thick plumes of smoke emerging from that particular building. You can see that there are a few passengers unsure of what to do, as clearly no train is going to be able to function, no railway station able to continue with, in fact, operations with these kind of scenes unfolding of violence and damage to public property. This is Buxar. Let's show you what's happening in Buxar, where railway tracks have been closed off completely. Protesters sloganeering set up tires, effigies in the midst of these railway tracks and set it on fire. Many of them with lathis in their hands, shouting slogans. So early this morning, this is the kind of violence that's been unleashed in parts of Bihar. And it's because of this that over 38 trains have been cancelled in the last few hours because railway tracks have been blocked off. Trains have been set on fire. It's not just in Samastipur. Look at this. This is a train that's up in flames right now. There are efforts being made by the officials to put out this blaze, but you can see that it's been completely torched. Nothing left as the charred remains of this train. You can see on your screens that we're trying to ascertain exactly where this is from, but police officials present there are trying to put out the fire as soon as possible. Unfortunately, many of these protesters have resorted to targeting trains, to setting them on fire, to damage public property. If window panes have been broken, doors have been completely destroyed, and you can see how many of them are also seated down, staging their protest, refusing to move. Police officials trying to ask them to cooperate, but it's clearly not happening. So it looks like the police is asking all of them to disperse as soon as possible because of the unruly scenes that are being witnessed as well. Many of them, were being told, are also being detained right now because of the violence that they've unleashed, the vandalism of public property that's been reported early this morning. But obviously there will be questions asked of the authorities, of police officials as well. For the last 2 days, these agitations have been happening. Why is it that adequate security wasn't provided on the ground to ensure that these kind of scenes don't play out early in the morning? And several parts of Bihar right now, the train stations have been completely shut off because protesters remain there in large numbers, setting tires on fire, blocking off railway tracks, setting trains on fire as well. This is in Begusarai. It's a similar situation in Ara, in Samastipur, in Buxar and several other parts of Bihar. The state government right now hasn't tried to reach out to any of these protesters. As far as the JD is concerned, they've made it very clear that they are against the Agnipath scheme. They've reached out to the central government, but there's been no message or appeal for calm and peace from Chief Minister Nitish Kumar, despite all of this that's playing out right now in Bihar. Milind Sharma is still with us. Milind, largely the damage, the losses that have been reported have been happening in parts of Bihar. Any specific details that the railways have been able to give us state-wise, or what kind of damage, what kind of delays and cancellations have been reported?
Yes, Akshita, in fact, there has been several places where damages have been reported, because what these protesters are doing is essentially setting coaches on fire. So yesterday we saw one AMU coach that was set on fire in Bihar, and in the morning, apart from 8 places, 8 districts where the students are protesting against Agnipath scheme, we're looking at protests now erupting in parts of Uttar Pradesh as well, especially Balia, where a few coaches of a train have been set on fire. So in this entire fracas, there have been more than 38 trains that have been cancelled, and 11 others have been partially cancelled, or their routes have been diverted, which brings up to about 72 trains that are running late or behind schedule. And there are 5 mail express trains and more than 29 passenger trains that have also been cancelled in these 2 states at the moment because of these protests. The railways officials we have spoken to, they are in the process of calculating the financial losses that they are incurring due to these protests. But when we look at these visuals, Akshita, you and I both will agree that both the police authorities as well as the RPF have not taken any coercive or firm action against these protesters. What they're trying to do is sort of disperse them. There has been a use of force in lathi charge, but not much, because the damage that they are causing to public property is more.
Very true, Milind. Barely any action that we're seeing on the ground, barely any officials that we see on the ground. These protesters are being allowed, let's be very clear, they're being allowed to go on this rampage, armed with lathis. Many of them, almost a mob of hundreds, barged into these railway stations, so nobody to stop them early this morning, and then resorted to this kind of vandalism. Unbelievable, really, what's playing out right now in parts of Bihar, particularly where there's been unprecedented violence that's been reported. Rohit Singh is joining us live this morning with the latest updates. Rohit, run us through what's happening in parts of Bihar, and what is the state government saying? Has there been no authorization given to officials to crack the whip on these protesters? Because we're seeing nothing being done on the ground to stop this kind of unruliness and violence.
Well, Akshita, the situation is extremely tense on the ground as far as Bihar is concerned. Several districts of the state are witnessing massive violence for the last 3 days in a row, and the government really failing to contain the situation on the ground. You see, today is the 3rd day of this entire agitation which is going on against Agnipath scheme in Bihar, and once again several railway stations, be it Buxar, in Ara, in Samastipur, in Lakhisarai, in Betia, or railway stations have been targeted, and trains have also been torched here. In Samastipur, the Bihar Sampark Kranti bogie of this train has been torched by the agitating youth. And
okay,
in
Rohit, my apologies for interrupting. Let's cut across to a reaction that's coming in right now.
ये एक स्किलिंग की अलग व्यवस्था की गई है, तो जो लोग नहीं समझे हैं वो समझने की कोशिश करें, और जहां आंदोलन हुआ है वहां पहचाने कि गैर विद्यार्थी कौन।
बिहार में सबसे ज्यादा हिंसा हो रही है।
मैं तो कह दिया कि वहां आरजेडी के गुंडे करा रहे हैं।
Giriraj Singh there saying there is RJD goons who are resorting to this kind of violence on the streets of Bihar. So the BJP maintaining here time and again that this has been incited by the opposition, that they are misleading youth much, and according to the BJP, like what happened with the farm laws when farmers were out on the streets, that's why army aspirants are right now on the streets as well. So the BJP is pinning the blame on the opposition. They're saying that this is in fact RJD goons who are resorting to this kind of violence on the streets.